My name is Nalini Rao, and 45 minutes ago, I was being treated like a criminal because of the color of my passport and the rhythm of my voice. Today, the security officers who thought they could humiliate a woman for sport are learning that the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one shouting, it's the one who stays silent while the world burns for them. They looked at me and saw an easy target, a foreign woman they could belittle to make themselves feel powerful in their cheap polyester uniforms. But they forgot that airports are gateways to the world. And in this city, the world is owned by a man who doesn't tolerate the scent of cowardice or the stain of small-mindedness. They thought they were the law, but they were about to meet the man who writes the rules. I am a senior business consultant, a woman who has spent her life navigating high-stakes boardrooms, negotiating multi-billion-dollar mergers, and outthinking some of the sharpest minds in the world. I moved to New York with a mastery of economics and a drive that most people couldn't fathom. I was at JFK, waiting to board a flight to London for a keynote address, standing in the security line like every other law-abiding traveler. I was dressed in a tailored suit, my documents were in perfect order, and my mind was already 3,000 miles away, focused on the presentation I had to deliver. But, to the two TSA officers at the gate, I wasn't a professional. I wasn't a traveler with a deadline. I was just another outsider to be picked apart for their own amusement. The harassment started subtly, a sneer at my Indian passport, a slow, deliberate thumbing through pages that had already been cleared by 3 separate security checkpoints. Then, it escalated into something far uglier. One of the officers, a man with a thick neck and an even thicker ego named Officer Miller, began mocking my accent when I politely asked why my bags were being diverted for a third manual check. "I don't understand you," he said, pitching his voice high so the entire terminal could hear, a cruel, mocking smirk playing on his lips. "Do they not teach you how to speak clearly where you come from? Or are you hiding something in that luggage that's making you so nervous you can't even speak English?" Before I could answer, he dumped my carefully packed carry-on bag onto the stainless steel table, scattering my personal items, my professional notes, and my dignity across the floor for everyone to see. Travelers began to stop and stare. I saw the glow of dozens of smartphones as people began to record the scene, looking for a viral moment rather than offering help. Miller's partner laughed, joining in on the joke. "Maybe she's not who she says she is. Let's take her to the back room and see how long it takes for her to find her English when we start the real search." The humiliation was a physical weight, a coldness that seeped into my bones as I stood there in the middle of a crowded airport, being treated like a threat simply because I dared to ask for professional respect. I felt the burn of 100 eyes on me, and for a moment the world felt very small and very cruel. Have you ever been treated like you didn't belong in a place you worked so hard to reach, simply because of how you looked or spoke? Tell me in the comments how you kept your head high when everyone was trying to pull you down. I stood my ground, my spine straight as a rod, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. I looked them in the eye, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble or plead. "My documents are legal, my visa is valid, and my conduct has been professional," I said, my voice steady despite the heat of anger in my face. "I suggest you do your job and let me board my flight before you make a mistake you cannot undo." Miller leaned in, his breath smelling of stale coffee and malice. "I decide who boards what in this airport, honey. And right now, I think you're going nowhere but a holding cell for questioning. You look like a security risk to me." Suddenly, the air in the terminal seemed to change. The noise of the crowd, the frantic beeping of airport carts, and the overhead announcements all faded into a heavy, sudden stillness. A man stepped forward from the line behind me, moving with a grace that was both elegant and terrifying. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal wool coat that looked like it cost more than the officers made in a decade. This was Samuel Drake. To the public, he is a private equity titan and a benefactor of the city's largest transport infrastructures. To those who understand the true architecture of New York power, he is the man who controls the docks, the transport unions, and the very flow of the city's commerce. He is an American Mafia boss who values loyalty and order above all else, and he had just stepped off a private flight to find the circus in his terminal. Samuel didn't say a word to the officers at first. He walked directly to me, took off his heavy cashmere coat, and placed it gently over my shoulders. The warmth of the fabric and the sudden, overwhelming protection of his presence felt like an impenetrable shield. He looked at me, his eyes a calm.
Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more revenge and love stories. Turn on the bell notification to stay updated.
Piercing gray that seemed to see everything. "Are you all right, Nalini?" he asked. He knew my name, not because we were friends, but because a man like Samuel Drake makes it his business to know every major player in the business world before they even clear customs. "I am fine," I replied, my voice gaining a new ironclad strength from the man standing beside me. Samuel turned to Officer Miller. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply stood there, his hands folded in front of him, looking at the officer as if he were a minor, unpleasant stain on an otherwise clean floor. "Mr. Drake," Miller stammered, his bravado vanishing instantly. The color drained from his face until he was the color of old parchment. He knew the face. Every officer in New York knew that Samuel Drake was the one man you never, ever wanted to notice you. We were just following protocol. This woman was being difficult and refusing to cooperate with a standard search. Protocol doesn't involve mocking a woman's heritage or dumping her personal life onto a dirty floor for sport, Samuel said. His voice was a low, melodic rumble that made the surrounding crowd take an instinctive step back. "You've made a very significant, very public mistake today, Officer Miller. You've confused a position of service with a position of power, and you've used that confusion to insult a woman who is under my personal protection and the protection of my associates." Samuel pulled a phone from his pocket. He made one call. He didn't speak for more than 10 seconds. "JFK, Terminal 4, Security Gate 7, clean it up, now," was all he said before sliding the phone back into his silk-lined pocket. The silence that followed was deafening. Within 3 minutes, the heavy security doors at the end of the terminal burst open. The Port Authority supervisors and the head of TSA security for the entire airport arrived, running as if their very lives depended on reaching us. They didn't look at me. They didn't even look at the travelers recording the scene. They looked at Samuel Drake with an expression of pure, unmitigated terror. "Mr. Drake, we are so incredibly sorry for this inexcusable oversight," the lead supervisor panted, his face pale and sweating. He turned to Miller and his partner, his voice turning into a whip. "Hand over your badges and your credentials. Right now. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. You'll be escorted out of the building by Port Authority police. There will be a full internal and federal investigation into your conduct, and I can promise you, you'll never work in security or any position of public trust again." The crowd watched in stunned silence as the two men who had been so loud, so arrogant, and so cruel were stripped of their authority and led away in absolute shame. They didn't look like kings of the airport anymore. They looked like small, broken boys who had finally hit a wall they couldn't climb. Samuel turned back to me, his expression unreadable, but his eyes steady and reassuring. He gestured to the supervisor, who was still trembling. "The lady has a flight to London. Ensure she is walked to her seat personally, and ensure that her luggage is repacked by your staff and handled with the care it deserves. If I hear so much as a whisper of a delay or a further inconvenience, I will consider it a personal affront to our business relationship." The supervisor nodded frantically, almost bowing. "Of course, Mr. Drake. Right this way, Miss Rao. We have a private VIP lounge waiting for you until the moment of boarding. Please allow us to make this right." I looked at Samuel as I prepared to walk away. The man who owned the shadows of New York had just stood in the brightest, most public light of the city to protect me. "Thank you, Samuel," I whispered. "You didn't have to do that." In a world full of people who bark to hide their own fear, Nalini, it's important to remind them who really owns the leash," he said with a faint, dangerous smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Safe travels. I'll see you for dinner when you return to my city." I boarded my flight 15 minutes later, sitting in a first-class cabin that had been upgraded to a private suite at no cost. As the plane lifted off over the Atlantic, I looked down at the grid of lights that made up New York. I was calm, I was untouched, and I felt a sense of power I had never known. I realized then that justice doesn't always come through a slow, grinding system. Sometimes it comes through the silent, overwhelming influence of a man who refuses to let the world be ugly to the people he respects. My name is Nalini Rao. I am a consultant, a traveler of the world, and a woman who knows that while some people use their small bits of power to humiliate, the truly powerful use their reach to restore the balance. I arrived in London with my head held high, knowing that back in New York, the mess had been cleaned up by a hand that never leaves a fingerprint. I was no longer just a passenger. I was a woman whose presence commanded the room, backed by the strength of a man who makes the world listen. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more Mafia love and justice stories. Where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more revenge and love stories. Turn on the bell notification to stay updated.